Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. The key priorities for the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union include the geopolitical positioning of the EU as a global player, while enhancing the European Union resilience. More than ever, the EU faces a wide range of challenges and threats. To counter them, protect its citizens, and enhance its strategic autonomy to become a stronger global partner, the EU needs to define what kind of security and defense actor it wants to be. The deterioration of the security situation on Europe's periphery in the last decade has raised expectations about the European Union's contribution to crisis prevention, stabilization, and peace building. While member states are implementing the national plans for the CSDP Compact, the European Union is also developing a strategic compass for security and defense to be ready by March 2022. The first semester of 2021, in the face of strategic dialogue with the EU member states and institutions, including the involvement of think tanks and other stakeholders. This is a period of reflection and contribute collection. To strengthen the European Union, we shall base our approaches on the anticipation, prevention, protection, and rapid response mechanisms to tackle a wide range of emerging threats, including the EU capabilities to respond to external conflicts and crises, to build and support the capabilities of partners, to provide security for their own population, and to protect the Union and its citizens through external action. The three strategic priorities for the EU's Common Security and Defence Policy, CSDP, as defined 5 years ago in the Implementation Plan on Security and Defence, which aim at deepening security and defence cooperation, enhancing permanent structured cooperation, rapid response, planning and conducting missions with reinforced synergies among civilian and military assets, taking forward common security and defence partnerships, notably with the United Nations, the African Union, NATO and OSCE. While the EU has made progress in many areas, the demands on the EU crisis management, both military and civilian, have constantly arisen, but it is often said that there is a lack of the necessary means and political will to act collectively. As remarked by several authors, this strategic compass as a common strategic outlook offers the opportunity to close the gap between too much rhetoric and too little action that have characterized the EU's security and defense efforts so far. The joint threat analysis prepared by the EU Intelligence Situation Centre, along with the recent scoping paper presented by the European External Action Service, provide a baseline framework for the compass, which will address 4 different interlinked areas: crisis management missions, resilience, capabilities and instruments, as well as partnerships. In such light, we may easily identify several key practical requirements, such as more robust command and control systems, better advanced and prudent planning, effective force generation and standby mechanisms, pre-organized and rapidly deployable assets, more robust and flexible mandates, and above all, stronger commitments. Bearing in mind the current context and challenges ahead, the European Gendarmerie Force seems to naturally reaffirm its added values as a multinational initiative of the EU member states, established by treaty with the aim to strengthen international crisis management capacities and contribute to the development of the common security and defence policy. Considering that boundaries between internal and external security tend to disappear, while the need for emerging civilian, military and police capabilities is growing, Gendarmerie-type forces combine the perfect set of skills for crisis management, while being excellent instruments for the boosting resilience across different areas, performing security, safety and defence missions. Established by treaty in 2007, the European Gendarmerie Force is offered as an operational, pre-organized, robust and rapidly deployable asset able to perform all police tasks in a crisis management scenario, acting in non-stabilized environments, while civilian police forces are unable to perform their duties. The military status of the police forces in EUROGENDFOR and its capacity to cover the full spectrum of police functions grant to the due flexibility to operate under a civilian authority or under a military chain of command. EUROGENDFOR can be put mainly at the disposal of the EU, the UN, OSCE, NATO, and other international organizations or ad hoc coalitions, essentially performing substitution, strengthening, or humanitarian missions. In the search for a more resilient and global Europe, and in line with the priorities defined by the Portuguese Presidency of the European Union, today's webinar aims at analyzing the EUROGENDFOR potential as vanguard instrument under the aegis of the EU and UN, potentially fostering effective partnerships and raising rapid deployment capabilities. Distinguished guests, to open the event, the political director of the Portuguese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Madalena Fischer.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this online seminar on EUROGENDFOR, potential as a vanguard instrument under the aegis of the European Union and the United Nations, and to address you with some welcoming remarks. One of the most fundamental axes of Portuguese foreign policy is the promotion and advancement of a multilateral, rules-based international order with the United Nations at the very core of this global governance system. The UN peacekeeping operations are a key element in strengthening the multilateral system and an important contribution to the advancement of international peace, security, and stability, a responsibility that is shared by all. A second fundamental axis of Portuguese foreign policy is naturally Europe and the ever necessary building and consolidation of the EU project. We see the EU as the most effective instrument to ensure peace and prosperity in Europe, essential to preserve and promote its fundamental values and to provide also solutions to complex and transnational challenges. As the EU values are UN values, a solid partnership between these two organizations is essential for peace and security, following a logic of complementarity and based upon comprehensive and cross-cutting concepts of peace that promote both human rights and sustainable development. Given this reality, Portugal is actively committed to continuing to play its part in the international crisis management and conflict prevention, deploying over the years military, gendarmerie, and police forces in 5 continents in the context of the UN, of NATO, and the European Union. In an increasingly volatile and unpredictable world that we are living nowadays, our forces are facing ever more challenging security environments, which calls upon our collective responsibility to reflect upon them and to find possible responses to be more effective and to improve available instruments. This is precisely the responsibility that Portugal has undertaken this semester during the presidency of the Council of the European Union. Throughout these last 6 months, we are almost at the end of June, we endeavored to continue the momentum and dynamism of recent years regarding EU security and defense initiatives. More specifically, we have sought to provide continuity and visibility in the implementation of the commitments that we collectively undertaken in the Civilian CSDP Compact, with the aim of promoting an integrated approach to crisis management, taking into account the internal-external security nexus. With this in mind, on the 24th of March, we co-organized with the European External Action Service an online seminar on national processes related to the implementation of the Civilian CSDP Compact. On the 19th of April, we organized also an international conference on civilian CSDP where we strove to advance synergies in some of the most pressing issues, counting on the precious collaboration of the Director General for Home Affairs, the European External Action Service, heads of missions from some of the civilian CFDP missions, the Center of Excellence for Civilian Crisis Management, and members of the academia. These events were very important ones, and they allowed us to delve into the state of play of the civilian CSDP Compact implementation and sought to deepen the cooperation between the civilian CFDP and the justice and home affairs domains, and to embed civilian CSDP in the ongoing discussion of the strategic compass. This brings me to another issue that was very important during our presidency of the Council, exactly in the area of security and defense domain, to ensure that we had a timely process of the strategic compact's reflection phase, with the aim of setting the EU a clear direction for the midterm, based upon the threat analysis elaborated by the European External Action Service in partnership with the European member states. In our view, this process requires clear, concrete, and actionable goals, both inward-looking in terms of resilience and outward-looking in terms of crisis management. These goals will then, in turn, help us identify which tools we need to develop, both within the European Union and behind the European Union, as regards, for example, partnerships. This brings me directly to today's meeting on the potential of the European Gendarmerie force, both within the framework of the civilian CSDP and of the strategic compass. Within the compact, let us recall there are two important commitments. Commitment 7, that urges to make available and utilize multinational structures and facilities that will help support for strengthening the civilian CSDP, and Commitment 11, that aims at the launching of a new mission of up to 200 personnel within 30 days after a Council decision in any area of operation, possibly with the contribution of multinational formations such as EUROGENDFOR. Therefore, the subject matter of today's seminar, which aims to explore the potential added value that EUROGENDFOR can bring in terms of rapid deployment capabilities and intervention, is closely linked with the implementation of the Compact. Within the strategic compass, deepening and discussing concept alignment and operational solutions between the European Union and EUROGENDFOR has the potential of producing concrete deliverables in enhancing our partnerships, providing capability development solutions for crisis management situations, and consequently enhancing the EU's resilience with the internal-external security nexus in mind. Moreover, this will allow us to explore also possible further avenues for cooperation between the European Union and the UN, as two of the most prominent international organizations in the field of crisis management, and in the context of increasing global uncertainty, the increased cooperation between the European Union and the UN is ever so pressing to safeguard the rules-based international order that we praise. And to guide and help us through this reflection, we count on a fantastic cast of speakers and moderators for today's seminar. Allow me to give my warmest regards to His Excellency, the Minister for Home Affairs, Eduardo Cabrita, General Rui Clero, Professor Luís Lobo Fernandes, Superintendent Chief Luís Carrilho, General Francisco Esteban Pérez, Colonel Paulo Gonçalves, Colonel Roberto Osipovich, Colonel Vincenzo Tagliaferri, Deputy Secretary General of Home Affairs Ricardo Carrilho, and our very own Security Policy Director, Jorge Aranda. We are, I am sure, in good hands. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward for a very fruitful discussion today. Thank you.
Following the remarkable introduction made by Ambassador Madalena Fischer on our opening session, distinguished guests, the General Commander of Guarda Nacional Republicana, the Portuguese National Republican Guard, Lieutenant General Rui Manuel Carlos Clero.
Excelentíssimas senhoras e senhores, muito bom dia e sejam bem-vindos. Atualmente, o contexto de crise nos países vizinhos, a crescente competição geoestratégica entre grandes potências e os grandes desafios tecnológicos levam a que a Europa procure aumentar a sua resiliência e autonomia enquanto ator global. Os conceitos e instrumentos devem continuar a evoluir e a adaptar-se, enquanto a cooperação é reforçada para fazer face às ameaças emergentes. Na procura de uma Europa mais resiliente e global e em linha com as prioridades definidas pela Presidência Portuguesa da União Europeia, o webinar que nos reúne hoje centra-se nas potencialidades da Força de Gendarmerie Europeia. A segurança do Estado começa pela identificação, prevenção e eliminação de ameaças e riscos transfronteiriços, frequentemente em colaboração com atores externos. A tendência para a cooperação internacional em matéria de segurança tem vindo a crescer, manifestando-se na variedade de missões e operações internacionais de gestão de crises, com o objetivo de estabilizar ambientes voláteis. O panorama da gestão de crises evoluiu muito significativamente nas últimas 6 décadas, existindo, neste momento, 79 missões em curso, com um total de quase 95 mil pessoas uniformizadas destacadas. A Organização das Nações Unidas é a principal organização internacional de monitorização de conflitos emergentes, concebendo soluções para estabilizar ambientes violentos e prestar apoio às populações afetadas. No âmbito da ONU, especialmente a partir do início do século XXI e após o relatório Brahimi, o destacamento de forças policiais multiplicou-se, sendo reconhecido como uma componente fundamental da abordagem integrada, conforme declarado nas resoluções 2185 de 2014 e 2382 de 2017 do Conselho de Segurança da ONU. O trabalho policial constitui-se como um crucial para a manutenção de paz e para o cumprimento dos mandatos, dependendo as estratégias de saída da reforma e do reforço das capacidades nacionais. A solicitação de recursos mais robustos, rapidamente projetáveis e autossustentáveis cresceu, a par de mandatos mais efetivos. Ainda assim, entre a teoria e a prática, verifica-se uma significativa lacuna a ser preenchida. O painel independente de alto nível sobre operações de paz de 2015 apresentou um segundo relatório Brahimi com o objetivo de melhorar a eficiência das operações de apoio à paz. Enfatizou o desiderato de estabelecer e aprofundar parcerias regionais, assim como de constituir uma capacidade de vanguarda como capacidade militar e policial permanente, com base em pequenos contingentes de vanguarda regionais, com capacidade de projeção para um polo regional autossustentável por um período de 180 dias. Conforme consta deste relatório, esta capacidade de vanguarda, considerada como uma reserva estratégica, deve ser capaz de reforçar ou de estabelecer rapidamente uma nova missão. Os esforços internacionais de resposta rápida têm sido, até ao momento, ad hoc e cada vez o sistema tem de se reinventar. Conforme referido no relatório, a ONU deve começar a trabalhar com os parceiros para definir, em termos mais concretos, uma estrutura e padrões para estabelecer a transição entre os First Responders para a missão da ONU. A este respeito, o relatório considera os Battlegroups da União Europeia como uma possível solução a ser considerada para a componente militar. Merece salientar que, mais recentemente, o Sistema de Prontidão da Capacidade de Manutenção de Paz de 2019 prevê uma capacidade de vanguarda ao nível de rápida projeção, uma força militar e policial integrada, de escalão brigada, composta por unidades de infantaria, helicópteros de ataque e outras unidades de apoio. No que diz respeito à União Europeia, esta seguiu os passos da ONU na busca de soluções integradas para a gestão de crises. A Política Comum de Segurança e Defesa tornou-se um instrumento essencial da política externa da União, proporcionando a possibilidade de intervir fora do seu território através de missões e operações civis e militares de gestão de crises, destinadas à manutenção de paz, à prevenção de conflitos e ao reforço da segurança internacional. Em 2000, a União Europeia definiu o seu primeiro Headline Goal Civil no Conselho Europeu da Feira, em Portugal, estipulando que deveria ser capaz de projetar 5.000 elementos policiais em 30 dias. Em 2003, a União Europeia projetou as suas primeiras missões de gestão civil de crises e adotou a Estratégia Europeia de Segurança, identificando ameaças e objetivos comuns. Desde então, especialmente a partir de 2016, com a Estratégia Global da União Europeia, a abordagem global expandiu-se, estabelecendo o conceito de abordagem integrada, enquanto o espectro de ação, sob a coordenação do CCPC, tem aumentado significativamente. No quadro das missões definidas para a implementação da Estratégia Global da União Europeia, com o objetivo de melhorar a cooperação e a capacidade de resposta da gestão civil de crises, foi estabelecido o desiderato de criar o Core Responsiveness Capability, utilizando instrumentos como o Battlegroup da União Europeia e a EUROGENDFOR, atuando como uma capacidade de planeamento e startup capaz de assegurar o reforço temporário ou o fornecimento de conhecimento especializado. Estes recursos, rapidamente projetáveis, podem apoiar novas missões, preencher lacunas entre uma fase inicial da implementação e a projeção completa, assim como podem assegurar componentes específicas essenciais para as missões existentes. Instrumentos militares e policiais robustos constituem uma componente essencial destas abordagens holísticas, integrada e no âmbito da bússola estratégica da União Europeia. Existe um consenso crescente sobre a necessidade de missões mais robustas e flexíveis, como parte crucial da abordagem integrada da União Europeia à gestão de crises. Tanto a União Europeia como as Nações Unidas desenvolveram abordagens para reforçar parcerias, sinergias e instrumentos disponíveis para uma rápida projeção e intervenção num contexto de crescente incerteza global. Cientes das conclusões dos Conselhos Europeus de Santa Maria da Feira e de Nice, em 2000, os 5 países fundadores da EUROGENDFOR tomaram a iniciativa de contribuir para desenvolver uma política europeia de segurança e defesa e dotar a Europa de plena capacidade para desempenhar todas as funções de polícia no domínio das operações de gestão de crises. A EUROGENDFOR é um instrumento operacional pré-organizado, robusto e de rápida projeção, constituído exclusivamente por forças policiais com estatuto militar dos seus membros, com o objetivo de assegurar todas as funções de polícia em cenários de crise, em substituição ou reforço durante todas as fases de uma operação de gestão de crises, sob a égide da União Europeia, assim como das Nações Unidas, da OSCE, da OTAN e de outras organizações internacionais. Tratando-se do maior instrumento de estabilização de polícia concebido para oferecer resposta eficiente e qualificada às atividades criminais em todos os cenários de crise. Acreditamos que as Gendarmerias representam a tradição e o futuro. Depois de apresentar este enquadramento, gostaria de agradecer aos moderadores e palestrantes convidados pelo seu valioso contributo que assegurará a desejada discussão sobre o assunto e conduzirá ao caminho a seguir a nível europeu e talvez global. Por fim, gostaria ainda de agradecer a todas as entidades e convidados pela presença e partilha de perspectivas, na certeza de que a sua participação constitui uma mais-valia. Espero que o webinar garanta um debate dinâmico e uma discussão produtiva entre todos. Muito obrigado.
After such a remarkable overview provided by Ambassador Madalena Fischer and by our Lieutenant General Rui Clero, we are pleased to introduce our first panel addressing the evolving security threats and the upcoming challenges for crisis management, followed by the CSTP Compact and EU Strategic Compass. You may see the proposed agenda. During the webinar, should you have any questions or eventually need further clarification, feel free to address us using the question and answer option. Please address as many questions as you wish, depending on the time available. This will be answering during the debate period at the end of the presentations. I would like to kindly request you to mute your microphones during the presentations in order to avoid any interference. As distinguished moderator for the first panel, we have the enormous pleasure and honor to have with us Professor Luís Lobo Fernandes, distinguished academic full professor of political science and international relations at the University of Minho in Portugal. Since 2004, he has been a Jean Monnet Chair of European Political Integration. He has also been awarded the Carlos Gulbenkian Fellowship in the School of Advanced International Studies from the Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. Previously, he has pro-rector of the University of Minho, visiting Fulbright Scholar in the Harry M. Jackson School of International Studies from the University of Washington, Seattle, and the International Relations Advisor for President António Ramalho Yanes. Professor Luís Lobo Fernandes holds an undergraduate and master's degree in international relations from the University of Minho and the Technical University of Lisbon, respectively. He has also holds a master's degree in political science from the University of Cincinnati. He completed his PhD with high honors in political science and international relations from the University of Cincinnati. A prolific writer, Professor Luís Lobo Fernandes writes regularly in the columns of the newspapers Público and Diário do Minho. Academically, he has written over 200 articles, books, chapters and other writings on political science and international relations, including in the fields of European studies, theories of international relations, and theories of external security policy, among many others.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first thank you for being here this morning. It is truly an honor, and I'd like to thank the Ministry, the Portuguese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as the Guarda Nacional Republicana for this invitation. As I said, it is truly an honor to be here. As our first distinguished speaker, to give us an overview on the evolving security threat and the upcoming challenges for crisis management, I would like to introduce Colonel Vincenzo Tagliaferri. Colonel Tagliaferri is a seconded national expert from Italy at the Center of Excellence for Civilian Crisis Management. He is a senior full colonel of the Italian National Police and has recently concluded 4 years as head of mission of the civilian CSDP mission EUBAM Libya. In 2015, he was the JHA attaché at the Italian representation, permanent representation of Italy to the EU. Vincenzo has 35 years of experience and has a solid background of work internationally with a particular focus on post-conflict scenarios. He joined the CSDP family, if I may, in the aftermath of the fall of the regime in Libya, where he led a new team for need assessment for integrated border management, and further participated in a fact-finding mission, a technical assessment mission, and was part of the core team launching EUBAM Libya's first edition in 2013. During his membership of the Central Directorate of Borders and Migration at the Department of Public Security, he is working both on site and at ministerial level. He mainly functioned in executive roles, such as immigration attaché at the Italian embassy in Tripoli, and was responsible for a variety of tasks tied to internal and external security. He has also served as advisor to the Minister of Interior, Parliamentary Undersecretary of State, and has an honorary public prosecutor for hearing sessions at the Criminal Court in Como. Vincenzo holds a BA in law from the State University of Rome and a PhD in European Union law and economics from the State University of Milan. He was promoted to the rank of primo dirigente for extraordinary merits. He is a member of the CSDP high-level course alumni organized by the ECDC. Colonel Vincenzo Tagliaferri, if I may please, the floor is yours, and thank you again, sir.
Thank you, dear Professor, dear Ambassador, and distinguished colleagues and commanders. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very proud of having been invited by the Portuguese authorities to take the floor in this very interesting workshop. And moreover, I am delighted to represent the Center of Excellence of Berlin on the occasion. The Center of Excellence is still a young association of European Union member states. We were 14 when we founded the center in February 2020. At the time of its opening in September last year, we were 19, and now we are already 21. Our mandate is to support our members in implementing their commitments under the Compact, thus making civilian crisis management a more powerful and convincing tool of the European Union foreign and security policy. So in a way, we are more than just the initiative on an EU member state, but we are not the EU institution in Brussels. This gives us a lot of room for maneuver as a linchpin, so to say, between the member state, the Brussels institution, and the civilian crisis management missions. Our preferred partners are the European External Action Service, namely Secretariat, CCPC, and ISP, as well as NATO is. The Center of Excellence budget comes from a grant from Germany's Federal Foreign Office, augmented with a contribution from its 21 members. Members also second personnel to the Center of Excellence. Italy seconded 2 experts, the Netherlands also 2, Finland 1, and Sweden also 1 expert. Secondees work alongside permanent staff as anywhere else in the theater. With the official opening of the center in September 2020, the arrival of the first secondees, as well as the recruitment of permanent staff, the amendment work plan focused on support to the work of the European Union member state under the informal national implementation plan clusters. At the annual report conference and the ensuing general meeting in November 2020, the Center of Excellence presented 5 work strands that, while being connected to the clusters, also transcended them as to ensure cross-cutting issues were looked at from an integrated and interdisciplinary perspective. To allow for an easier operationalization of these work strands, the Center of Excellence further specified them, leading to their transformation into priorities. Thus, the priorities are not different, but rather a more specific version of the work strands. About the Center of Excellence methodology for implementing its priorities. As already described in its presentation at the joint Portuguese Presidency and External Action Service Secretariat webinar last 24th of March, the Center is focusing its effort on identifying good practice and existing challenges with regards to compact implementation among its members, facilitating discussions on how to overcome identified challenges in members' different national contexts, facilitating dissemination and discussion of this good practice among its members, augmenting identified good practice through in-house analysis, facilitating the adaptation of identified and augmented good practice to other national contexts, and finally supporting individual members in the implementation of identified relevant good practice. Related to crisis management, the following three European Union global strategies priorities are of key concern, namely responding to external conflict and crisis, building the capacity of partners, and protecting the Union of its citizens. These priorities provide the overarching vision of all currently relevant capability development activities. Since 2016, the Council has set priorities and provided new guidance on defense cooperation and on adjusting tools, structures, and financing, including by drawing on the full potential of the Lisbon Treaty. This has led in recent years to a significant increase in capability development activity, both in Brussels and in the member states. The Civilian CSDP Compact adopted in 2018 is an example of this new capability development initiatives, also on the front of security. It's aimed at further emphasizing the contribution of civilian CSDP to the EU integrated approach, as highlighted in the EU global strategy. As such, civilian CSDP is part of the internal-external security nexus, which puts the security of EU citizens first. However, the civilian compact is ambitious not only at the political level, but also in terms of required capabilities for civilian CSDP. This includes enhancing the ability of the EU to rapidly deploy missions and needs to extend to the acquisition of the relevant civilian capabilities along the internal-external security nexus. The favorite priorities aim at long-term stabilization through capacity building and institutional reform in complementarity to other EU instruments to addressing new security challenges. Over the years, the European Union has built an expertise and an impressive track record for these tracks, which is well recognized by beneficiary countries. Clearly, a partial refocusing of civilian CSDP in line with the priorities of the global strategies was necessary, but the EU should also retain this strength. A new element to be further included in this process is the list of main actions mapped out with the new European Union Security Union strategy for the period from 2020 to 2025 and set out by the European Commission in July 2020. The European Commission has identified and refocused on critical areas such as terrorism and violent radicalization, organized crime and trafficking of human beings, cybercrimes being prominent evolving security threats. Flexible mandates and missions and a modular approach are necessary to better respond to the current conflict environment. Stakeholders widely recognize that longer mandates and missions are required to achieve the desired impact and enter a fruitful dialogue with the civil society in the host country. In a dynamic crisis environment, missions need to be able to adjust and adapt to external developments, such as to add or remove components. In such a dimension, we believe that the use of the integrated policy units come in handy thanks to the wide array of tactical engagement this option would offer, in particular in those theaters of operation where conflicts are not over yet. Noteworthy to highlight that the big potential role they could also have as enabled for the civilian missions to support the line of operations of the mission itself to implement its mandate. However, a separate and more in-depth reflection about the use of integrated policy unit in civilian CSDP missions, which goes beyond the planning phase, is needed. In this vein, it's necessary to sort legal, logistic, and financial issues out before even thinking to take action. Particular attention should be paid towards the ambition, the commitment, and the will of the political level. Nevertheless, the various EU beneficiaries remain confident about the positive outcome of the strategic compass, and from the future implementation of the civilian compact, both tools will facilitate the fine-tuning of the mentioned asset. Thanks a lot for your kind attention, and I hand over the floor to the mediator.
Colonel Tagliaferri, for such, let me say, enlightening presentation on these key issues. Proceeding with our agenda, as our second distinguished speaker, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jorge Aranda to give us a presentation on the CSDP Compact and the EU Strategic Compacts. Jorge Aranda is a Portuguese career diplomat since 1998. He is currently the Security Policy Director at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Lisbon. He was formerly a diplomatic advisor to the Prime Minister and in previous governments, diplomatic advisor to the State Secretary for European Affairs and diplomatic advisor to the State Secretary for National Defense and Maritime Affairs. His last assignment abroad was in Brussels as Defense Counselor at the Permanent Delegation of Portugal to NATO. He had also been posted before as Chargé d'Affaires to Helsinki, as well as to the embassies in Warsaw, Berlin, and Copenhagen. He holds a master's degree in international relations from the Institute for Social and Political Science at the University of Lisbon, where he has been teaching over the last year as a guest professor in the postgraduate program, Corporate Diplomacy, and where he is currently a PhD student in international relations. Dr. Jorge Aranda, please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much again, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Professor Rob Fernandes, for the introduction and also for participating once again with us in the Portuguese Presidency event. It's an honor to have you in April in the International Function Civilian CSDP, which we organized, also with the support of the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Portuguese National Republican Guard. And let me also thank the hospitality of GNR, our Portuguese Gendarmerie, for hosting us here and also for this initiative. We are very happy to support and help organize the event on such important aspects. Let me also salute Colonel Tagliaferri. It's been a pleasure also to collaborate with the Berlin-based Center of Excellence for Civilian Crisis Management throughout this Portuguese presidency, and it's a pleasure to do so also today. Now, I have the honor and the opportunity to address this esteemed audience today on two very important topics which have been predominant throughout the Portuguese semester. One of them is the Civilian CSDP Compact and its implementation, and the other one, the Strategic Compact, the Compacts and the Compact reflection process around it. As my political director already stated in opening remarks, the Portuguese presidency has sought to give continuity and visibility to the implementation of this commitment that EU member states have made within the Civilian CSDP Compact. And as Ambassador Fischer also mentioned, we have organized throughout this 6 months set of events also to help this implementation and also our reflection. But this semester is also marked by two major developments. One of them, which we find of particular importance and to be highlighted, is the fact that all 27 member states have produced and presented their national implementation plans on the civilian CSDP Compact. And the other remarkable trace of this semester is the fact that we are precisely at a halfway point on the implementation of the civilian CSDP Compact, with a view to the summer of 2023, where we hope that this aim will be achieved. So, with these two significant developments and with this perspective of the of both the summer of 2023 but also already in 2022, already mentioned, the presentation of the strategic compass. I would like, first of all, and because of this subject, that we are to address the conceptual evolution, let me also draw a little bit into the past, sorry, and talk a little bit about the another Portuguese presidency, the one which took place in 2000, and specifically on the conclusions of its European Council that took place in the golden city of Santa Maria da Feira. We know today the Feira priorities approved then, and there were the core tasks of civilian crisis management, such as strengthening of the police, rule of law, civil administration, and civil protection. With this as foundation, the EU member states have then endeavored to fulfill this set of priorities by a set of civilian missions that were outlined, derived from the Feira summit, the conclusions, and that would help throughout the following years to cement what we believe is a distinctive dimension of the common foreign and security policy, which is the civilian dimension of CSTP. Now, obviously, also very important was the addition of activities to the Feira priorities related to the monitoring of ceasefire agreements, security sector reform, and DDR, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration ex competence. After that, with the changes brought about with the Treaty of Lisbon as regards CSTP as a whole, but also with the ideas enshrined in the EU Global Strategy of 2016, common foreign and security policy requested a common vision and a common action from Europe for it to become the global security provider that it aims to be. And in such a coherent and structured manner as is possible. Now, the global strategy, as it was already mentioned here, establishes a level of ambition with three priorities: responding to external conflicts and crises, developing the capabilities of partners, and protecting the Union and its citizens. And it also establishes that the EU should contribute to promoting and guaranteeing the security of citizens in its territory through an integrated approach. This dimension of integrated approach is also a distinctive and remarkable aspect of the EU's external policy. But the external policy, and this is also a very distinctive side of the EU, does not it's not implemented in the splendid isolation of other policies, including the Union's internal security policies. Now, from this level of ambition, a set of types for CSTP missions and operations were then developed and have been carried out, both military and civilian. And within this civilian dimension, such missions include rapid response, obviously civilian executive missions, civilian capability development missions, and also missions of security sector reform, rule of law, border management, resilience, responding also to hybrid threat. All these are aspects of these civilian CSTP missions, which have been developed throughout the years and in which Portugal has been very actively participating. With the aims outlined in the global strategy, but also with this growing necessity of the EU becoming a global security partner, necessarily CSTP has gained significant importance. And with the adoption in 2018, the Civilian CSTP Compact, member states committed to this set of concrete commitments, 22, which have been now being under implementation and also under evaluation, because annually have a review conference in the second semester usually. And in this occasion, we have the opportunity to review the process of implementation of such commitments. We know that amongst those priorities in the Civilian CSP Compact are raising the percentage of seconded national experts deployed to civilian missions, also adapting decision-making procedures at national level, but also legislative and budgetary frameworks to increase the availability and participation of experts in missions, and also cross-cutting issues as well to be promoted, such as human rights and women in security. Partnerships and multinational structures such as EUROGENDFOR have a specific and very important role to play in this regard, as it was already here mentioned by Ambassador Fischer and General Corollary. And the fact that we are here today and we are able to, in this panel, address mainly the EU, but in the next panel also the UN, gives us the true dimension of the role of Vanguard that the EUROGENDFOR can play, not only in these two frameworks, but also in the frameworks of other international organizations, as also mentioned, such as NATO and the USC. Now, a final word on the strategic compass. We have, before that, let me just refer the clusters to help implement the commitments. Member states, with the precious help of the External Action Service, have been cooperating in what we call clusters, which are headed by some chefs de file, some member states for coordinating that work in specific subjects. Portugal is with the Netherlands coordinating the cluster on national systems of coordination, Sweden on budgetary and legislative issues, Germany on strategic communications, Ireland on career path development of freelancers, Spain and Finland on participation of women, and Austria on research, innovation and security. Now, the strategic compass, which we, after the German presidency and very important work on the evaluation of the threats, the Portuguese presidency has been very active in promoting the brainstorming phase of this process, this reflection process, in order to come up during the French presidency in 2022 with a document which aims at helping to implement the already mentioned level of ambition of the EU global strategy in a way which is not only concrete and operational and structured, but also strategic, as the name already says, and with a view to rendering even more coherent and more coordinated all the different initiatives that have been developed within the European Union in the past years. So this strategic compass will have in the second semester of this year a phase under the Slovenian presidency of drafting, where after all these non-papers which we have been producing, all this webinar which we have been organizing, will then come to a phase of more concrete drafting. The four baskets of the strategic compass were already mentioned. We believe that civilian CSDP has a cross-cutting nature to all these baskets and should be fully embedded in our reflection process of the strategic compass. And this will also the reason why we, in a semester, the first semester of the year, in which usually civilian CSDP is not so visible as in the second, we have organized under the Portuguese presidency an international conference on civilian CSDP, and which we hoped was helpful, as we hope that today's webinar will also be in coming a little bit closer and rendering it more operational for the initiatives that we have. I hope that I was able to give some food for thought to our debates, and I stand obviously ready to any comments and questions that exist. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jorge Aranda, for providing us with such an important and detailed presentation. To conclude the first panel, I would like to initiate our 15 minutes debate, bearing in mind some of the interesting questions that were raised by the audience. The first one is addressed to Colonel Tagliaferro. Could the mentioned threats hamper the implementation of next generation new plan or other prominent global economic plans? So if please go ahead, Colonel Tagliaferri.
Thank you. With pleasure, Professor. Next preliminary consideration, next generation EU plan can be considered separate from the three, so to speak, big transitions, because many aspects of it will be absorbed by them, namely digitalization, energetic, and ecological. Each of the mentioned areas are not standing alone, whereas many cross-cutting elements are in common. Assuming that the interlinkage amongst them would create a multi-option business to protect, the entire process should be duly accompanied by a robust security policy due to the huge pull factor they will represent towards the transnational organized crime and terrorist organizations. Within the digitalization context, a warning look must be turned to the vulnerability of Internet of Things and the way critical infrastructures could be put in danger both physically and virtually, via cybercrime, for instance. I would draw your attention on the recent past, just some weeks ago, what happened with the case of the West USA oil pipeline due to the ransomware. I mean, half of the country has been stocked without oil. With regard, speaking of interlinkage of this argument, with regard to the energetic, the new green frontier could face the reluctance which dark powers would manipulate to hinder or even curb. Many countries are still estimating their future GDP incomes on traditional energies. Moreover, to implement all the lie-down transitions, further and different commodities are needed to make, for instance, microchips or battery or equipment for communication and so on. This said, robust supply chain might have an impact on geostrategic policy choices, including the risk of drawing the attention of criminal groups. The last big area, the climate change. The climate changes are not only defrosting polar ice caps, but also rendering more arid continents. We have the case of Africa. Thus causing lack of water and resulting in displacement of migratory flows, which will offer the opportunity to organized crime to commit horrible crimes such as trafficking of human beings. In sum, we are in front of a big push factors hard to contain or even to handle. To tackle and better prevent all criminal threats, it's ought to be able to remodulate our analysis and tactical approach. Analytical capability should bear in mind that the new scenario is now marked by a combination of traditional and emerging threats. Thus, great ability and of adaptation is required, for instance, by constantly raising the awareness and keeping trained staff, for instance. And as for COVID-19, last reflection, last take on this front, as for COVID-19, the lesson is that member state alone can't face this challenging, this new trend of threats. Instead, a strong and tight Europe can do it. As a final remark, I would say, needless to say that in our rule of law world, acting as a law enforcement actors, an adequate legal, I would recommend an adequate legal framework as a precondition, as a starting point for any action.
The second question is addressed to Dr. Jorge Randa. It reads as follows. Within the scope of the EU Strategic Compass, do you think the implementation of the CSDP Compact being considered as a priority, or somehow it became a secondary topic? Thank you, Dr. Randa.
It's yes, it's a very interesting question, as sometimes we might have the feeling, or could have had this feeling over the last years, that maybe only the military dimension of CSDP was being developed, and this idea has some maybe justified by the fact that there were indeed some very concrete developments in so-called European defence area, such as the permanent structured cooperation, PESCO. There was also the creation of the European Defence Fund. The fact that this European Defence Fund was successfully based on the EDIDP, this plan for development of the European defence industries. There's also the CARD, the Coordinate and Review on Defence, which is also an element of this military dimension, this defence dimension of CSDP. And we could maybe think, because of all these developments, that the civilian dimension of CSDP was being somehow neglected. It's not my personal view, as I had the opportunity of also saying during my presentation, stating and recalling the developments that we had, and the fact that we have now a civilian CSDP compact, which is a very encompassing and at the same time very concrete framework document. This gives us already the framework to go deeper in what we have to and what we want to achieve in the civilian CSDP dimension. The fact that the strategic compass does not necessarily give an autonomous character to the civilian dimension of CSDP is, in my personal view, also not to its detriment. In fact, as I also have the opportunity to say, the cross-cutting nature of civilian CSDP allows it to be able to be addressed in all of the four different facets of the strategic compass. Crisis management is a case in point, and the fact that we have today in this panel Colonel Perry, a distinguished representative of the Civilian Crisis Management Center of Excellence, is a proof of that. The fact that we, and also a little bit looking inward within the European Union, that we are also addressing the capabilities, might also give us the right impression that also in the civilian CSDP realm, there's a lot that has been going on, and the commitments that we have been implementing also show us that path to capability development that is also needed in this regard. But the fact that, and this was already here addressed a couple of times, the fact that threats and challenges of the CSDP domain overcome the usual frontier between what is internal and what is external security, also gives us the dimension of the resilience requirements and resilience needs that we need to address within the strategic compass, specifically in that resilience basket. And finally, the fourth but not least important basket of partnerships is also a particular sign of how civilian CSDP is not neglected. We are here addressing the role that the EU can have, not only within the European Union, but in other frameworks. The fact that the EU is also reaching out to other partners, not only building their capacity, but working with them and with other international organizations in this field that address the challenge, is also, in my view, the fact that we cannot claim that civilian CSDP is neglected in the strategic compass. Quite on the contrary, but Portugal has been very active in promoting that embedment together with so many other like-minded EU member states. And I think it's essential, and it's quite essential, that we need the citizens need to be properly highlighted in strategic policy.
Thank you so much again, sir, for your key remarks, let me say. And also let me move on to the third question addressed to Colonel Tagliaferri. And it reads as follows. The role of police assets, and particularly police units in crisis management, tends to be increasingly more relevant as we are getting more and more aware of the new and evolving threats. What would you like to say about this, sir? Thank you, Colonel Tagliaferri.
Yeah, I would share some thoughts by also referring to my personal experience on the theater in a very well-known hostile environment. I mean, we had heard at the beginning preliminary remarks by the ambassador how it's important to find out a window of opportunities in the ongoing processes at the EU level. The ambassador already mentioned, the Ambassador Fischer kindly mentioned the priority 7 and 11, if I don't mistake. But I would also humbly add on top this that we do also have the opportunity to use the commitment 18, 19, and also partially the 20th of the civilian compact to further expand and try to, as much as we can, to use the integrated police unit in this domain, having in mind that all this commitment of the civilian compact that I lie down, they do refer to concepts such as inclusive, involving, complementarity, and synergies, all these elements that are aimed at enhancing the entire civilian CSDP impact on the ground. So I am in favor of this asset while it will be embedded, whereas it will be embedded into a civilian CSDP compact, but many reflections should be shared yet. I think that first of all we have to take bear in mind what is really the political commitment that would allow to do so. I mean, the political commitment and the political ambition is not only aimed at launching a mission or deciding it's appropriate to embed IPUS into civilian CSDP mission, but I would also say, I would clearly stress that the political will should also find all the conditions to really have a buy-in from the beneficiary countries. We get to know that one of the primary importance, ultimate importance for who also is on the lead is the safe and the security of its staff on the ground. Therefore, buy-in from the local authorities is essential, and this buy-in should be achieved only by the political level, of course. It's important to have the buy-in also to pave the way for the SOMA, the mission agreement, which would grant to the personnel on the ground immunities and privileges which are needed to work in a very safe way. Other important elements, but this is a discussion that would be digged in another forum, not right now, but just to introduce the elements, Professor. I would say it's okay, synergies as recalled in the compact, but more reflection in depth should be paid for common assets such as security, logistic, finance, procurement, communication, information system. All these aspects can be merged all together and find out positive synergies to be used in favor of the line of operations of a mission. Over to you, Professor.
Thanks for your very, really key remarks. If I may, I will now address the last question to Dr. Jorge Aranda, and it reads as follows. The EU global strategy also mentions the need for a European strategic autonomy. how do you see the strategic compact process, as contributing to that concept, and how does the EU's strategic autonomy fit into the current framework security architecture in Europe provided by NATO? I don't know whether you could comment on such important question of autonomy.
Yes, thank you very much, and it is indeed a very important question. We have been debating quite frequently over the last years the question of the strategic autonomy. It's not a new concept, it's actually part of the EU global strategy, this idea that the European Union should have the capacity to act and to become the global security provider that it aims to be. But sometimes this debate gets, if I may use the term, hijacked by the impression or the opinion that the EU needs to be strategically autonomous from somebody, be it another organization, be it a strategic partner such as NATO, for instance, which you mentioned, or the US. I mean, these are different debates. Portugal is a member state of both organizations, and in both organizations we have been stating that what we think that we should achieve in terms of strategic autonomy within the European Union should not come to the detriment to what we are developing at NATO, and but rather builds on this complementarity and the cooperation between both organizations. And notwithstanding the fact that we have also, particularly in the United States and Canada as transatlantic partners, we have good allies, and there is also a role enshrined in the Lisbon Treaty regarding NATO as a source of collective defense for the member states, which are also allies. So the debates on strategic autonomy should not be done in necessarily in these terms that the EU should become autonomous from such organization, from such obligation. Rather, the EU, as I think, is developing its autonomy to become, to have the capacity to act with and not necessarily against or without. The fact that Portugal has also wide understanding of security, and the fact that we, when we talk about strategic autonomy, we go beyond the defense, rearmament, we understand security, also encompassing the aspects which we already mentioned here, related to resilience, critical structures, questions of threats, the stability of our partners in our neighborhood and further afield. All these maritime security, obviously, in its various dimensions. All these questions are part of that autonomy that we aim at, but an autonomy that should not be understood as the EU acting in isolation of the rest of the world. And because the European Union wants to, and member states want to contribute to an effective multilateralism, to a rules-based international order. And that means that the EU is to work and continue to cooperate with others, be it international organizations, obviously the UN, the NATO, and the Union, and so many others, also individual like-minded countries. And the fact that the strategic compass has in one of its aspects precisely the question of partnerships already gives us the idea that strategic autonomy of the EU will not be done in splendid isolation, but in this formula, which I believe is a very well-crafted one, that the European Union should act alone if needed, but together if possible. And that means working also with partnerships, developing capability of business partners, but also those partners to help us be more able, more effective in promoting security throughout the world.
Thank you so much, sir, again, for your very keen remarks on this issue. If I may, to conclude, I would say that the civilian compact shows a new ambition, not only at the political level, but also in terms of the required capabilities for civilian CSDP, as we have seen this morning, emphasizing the contribution of civilian CSDP to the EU's integrated approach, as highlighted in the EU global strategy. This includes enhancing the ability of the EU to rapidly deploy missions and the need to extend to the acquisition of the relevant civilian capabilities along the internal-external security nexus. I would say, and this is also my view on the matter, I do think that these are the most important challenges ahead. So I think we had a very, very important set of discussion this morning, and then, pointing really to the challenges ahead. So I would like to thank you again, and thank Colonel Vincenzo Tagliaferri for your brilliant presentation, as well as Dr. Jorge Aranda for also your brilliant presentation this morning. Again, I'd like to say that I was very honored to be here and be invited to this event. Have a good day, sir. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. We hope you are enjoying the webinar. Within a few minutes, we will start the second panel of our webinar, focus on the operational improvements perceived by the UN with the new Vanguard capability, by the EU with the co-responsiveness capacity, and by considering the EUROGENDFOR and its added value as an instrument to fulfill the mentioned concepts from the UN and EU. Now, we would like to invite the audience to take a quick coffee break. We will resume within 15 minutes. Thank you.
Portugal assume a presidência do Conselho da União Europeia durante o primeiro semestre de 2021. É a oportunidade para promover uma agenda atual para a União Europeia, indo ao encontro dos cidadãos europeus, das suas ambições, dos seus interesses e assuntos, dos desafios globais que têm impacto nas suas vidas. É um reencontro dos Estados-membros numa altura de extrema importância para a coesão e solidariedade da equipa europeia em torno dos seus valores, metas e objetivos de crescimento. As transformações que se fazem sentir em todo o mundo e nos afetam a todos merecem da União Europeia respostas sustentáveis, responsáveis, globais. A presidência portuguesa vai destacar a forma global e integrada com que a União Europeia responde aos grandes desafios da modernidade. A Europa social, a transformação digital, as preocupações ambientais, a abertura a outras regiões do mundo. A resiliência da Europa assenta na solidez das suas respostas e modelos de desenvolvimento, que colocam os cidadãos no centro do projeto europeu e que contam com a coesão e solidariedade das suas comunidades para superar as adversidades, nunca deixando ninguém para trás. Portugal assume a presidência do Conselho da União Europeia com a naturalidade da sua liderança, no diálogo com outras regiões do globo e com os seus exemplos de boas práticas nas políticas de desenvolvimento, demonstrando a resiliência do modelo social europeu. Portugal vai projetar uma mensagem de solidariedade e de confiança no futuro, promovendo o país na Europa e no mundo, destacando a sustentabilidade ambiental e social, a globalização responsável, o acesso à tecnologia e à digitalização. A partir do Centro Cultural de Belém, centro operacional da Presidência, as atividades e reuniões vão alargar-se a outras cidades de Portugal e a palcos virtuais por streaming e videoconferência com outros Estados-membros. Uma presidência digital em que a tecnologia e a inovação aproximam a Europa e os cidadãos. Esta visão integrada afirma Portugal como protagonista global aberto ao mundo, que assume o seu papel condutor da União Europeia por ocasião da presidência. Presidência portuguesa do Conselho da União Europeia. Tempo de agir por uma recuperação justa, verde e digital.
The end of the 18th century. To support territories that were experiencing situations of high insecurity and crime, more European countries established the Gendarmerie, police forces with military status. These resources were called on to provide a robust professional solution to the increased request for real public security. Since their establishment, these gendarmerie forces have continued to operate for and within the populace, offering an all-encompassing set of capacities rooted in their intrinsic military nature. Such an approach could be easily applied to deployments abroad, where a population is constantly under threat before and during conflicts or crises. Think of a country on the brink of war or at its very end. Within this frame, from security gap to stabilization and reconstruction, Gendarmerie forces embody the main stability policing actor to restore law and order. EUROGENDFOR, the European Gendarmerie Force, was formed for this purpose by France, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal and Spain, later followed by Poland and Romania, now with Lithuania and Turkey respectively as partner and observer. This police force with military status is capable of performing all police tasks in conflict prevention, peacemaking, peace enforcing, peacekeeping, peace building, humanitarian and rescue missions, in any crisis management operations outside the European Union. The dual nature of the Gendarmerie forces provides EUROGENFOR with the abilities required to operate in policing fields in destabilized areas, under both military and civilian chains of command, thus bringing an effective added value to the re-establishment of the rule of law. EUROGENFOR has two main functions: temporarily substituting the local police when it either no longer exists or is critically ineffective, and strengthening and restoring law enforcement bodies with monitoring, tutoring, training, advising and mentoring functions, and can deploy units, specialized teams of single officers. But restoring order and security is a delicate process that requires careful planning, and the organization of EUROGENFOR is designed precisely for this purpose. At the strategic level, it is ruled by the CHIMIN, the high-level interdepartmental committee composed of representatives of the ministers and structures governing the participating forces, while the operational level is embodied by the permanent headquarters located in Vicenza, Italy, partially deployable to missions, which expresses a standing planning capacity to support any project at hand. Also, through its operations room, it provides 24/7 backing to operations. Therefore, EUROGENFOR has the unique ability to respond quickly and effectively, and provide swift operational planning following a request for intervention, which includes all the following aspects: organization of the forces, management of the mission, police intelligence and information, training and capacity building, logistics, and coordination with leading organizations. No other structure can manage this process in the policing field in the same time frame on the international scene. EUROGENFOR is at the disposal of the EU and can also partake in interventions conducted by the UN, NATO, OSCE or other international organizations to bring security and peace to the countries or areas that need it most.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, within 2 minutes we will resume our webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, on behalf of the Portuguese Presidency of the Council of the European Union, thank you for joining this event. Welcome back to our webinar on the European Gendarmerie Force potential as Vanguard instrument under the aegis of European Union and United Nations. The second panel of our webinar will focus on the operational improvements perceived by the UN with the new peacekeeping rapid deployment system and Vanguard capability, by the EU with the co-responsiveness capacity, and by considering the EUROGENDFOR and its added value as an instrument to fulfill the mentioned concepts from UN and EU. As distinguished moderator for the second panel, we have the enormous pleasure and honor to have with us Dr. Ricardo Carrilho, Deputy Secretary General in charge of International Relations and Management of EU Funds of General Directorate of Home Affairs of the Ministry of Home Affairs. Mr. Ricardo Carrilho has a degree in International Relations and Political Science from the Nova University of Lisbon and a master's degree in the European Studies in the field of European governance from the College of Europe in Natolin, Warsaw, one of the oldest and Europe's most renowned institute of postgraduate studies. Early in his career, Mr. Ricardo Carrilho was the UEFA Society Euro 2004 liaison officer. He has then appointed advisor to the Minister of State and Internal Affairs and Minister of Internal Affairs of the 17 and 18 constitutional governments, where he was responsible for the areas like technical counseling and political advising in international relations matters, advising on matters of the Portuguese Republic information system, proximity policing integrating programs and criminal prevention on the European network accompanyment, and liaison officer of the Portuguese Immigration and Border Service, CEF. Between 2009 and 2014, Mr. Ricardo Carrilho was the director of the International Relations area of the General Directorate of Internal Affairs. In 2015, he was appointed Deputy Secretary General of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, position that he still currently holds. Mr. Ricardo Carrilho was awarded a Merit Medal for Liberty and Security in European Union by the Minister of Internal Affairs in 2007. Should you have any questions or eventually need further clarification, feel free to address us using the question and answer option. Please address as many questions as you wish, depending on the time available. This will be answering during the debate and conclusions period at the end of the presentations. I would like to kindly request you to mute your microphones during the presentations in order to avoid any interference.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Madalena Fischer, General Rui Clero, dear moderators, honorable speakers, good morning to you all, and thank you so much for the invitation that has been addressed to me and in more concrete terms to our General Secretariat of the Ministry of Home Affairs of Portugal to uphold the moderation of the second panel of our European Gendarmerie Force potential as a vanguard instrument under the aegis of the European Union and the United Nations Conference. This second panel, as we all know, will be addressing the operational improvements that have been dealt and have been felt in this area. And it is with utmost honor that I would like to welcome to this panel as a first speaker, our third speaker of the day, as a matter of fact, but as the first speaker for this panel, to my dearest friend, Superintendent-Chief Luís Carrilho. He is currently a UN police advisor, and his communication will be addressing the United Nations integrated missions, the UN police, and the recent Vanguard capability. Luís Carrilho is currently the United Nations police advisor and the director of the police division at the UN HQ headquarters in New York, United States of America. And he is also a member of the UNITAR Advisory Board of the Peacekeeping Training Program. Previously, Luís Carrilho was Police Commissioner of the United Nations Multidimensional Integrated Mission Stabilization in Central African Republic from September 2014 until September 2016. From 16 onwards until October 2017, Luís Carrilho was the Senior Inspector at the National Public Security Police. He has extensive experience and an outstanding career in the field of international policing. Ex-Police Commissioner, Luís Carrilho first joined the United Nations in 1996, working primarily on training of civilian police with the United Nations mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina until 1998. In 2000 and 2001, he returned to the UN peacekeeping with the United Nations Transitional Administration in East Timor, UNTAYAT, as director of the Timorist or East Timor Police Training College and spokesperson for the United Nations Police. He was appointed as Police Commissioner of the United Nations Integrated Mission in East Timor from February 2009 to the end of the mission on December 2012. In January 2013, he was then appointed Police Commissioner of the United Nations Mission Sterilization in Haiti, and he served in that function until September 2014. Luís Carrilho previously worked as the head of security of the President of the Portuguese Republic, where he was responsible for overseeing the safety and security of the President and his office. He also served as the commander of the Close Protection of the Public Security Police, commanding the provision of security protection for national principles and foreign dignitaries visiting Portugal and witnessed protections. In the late 90s, he worked as the Chief of Cabinet of the Director of the Police College in Portugal. Superintendent Luís Carrilho, my dearest colleague and friend Luís, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear moderator and dear friend. Dr. Ricardo Carrilho, is also an honor for me to be here with you as a moderator in this panel, and a word also of course, salutation to the dear fellow panelists, General Esteban Pérez, dear Paco, and also Colonel Paulo Gonçalves. So, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am very honored to be here today representing the United Nations Police, and at the outset, let me thank the Portuguese Presidency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Home Affairs, GNR and EUROGENDFOR for this invitation to be here today. The United Nations Police occupy a unique role among the world's police with an authorized strength of over 12,500 women and men from more than 90 countries serving in the front lines of 16 peace operations across the globe. Working alongside with our civilian and military counterparts in integrated missions, the United Nations Police maintain law and order, protect civilians, and empower the most vulnerable by providing direct operational support to host state police or by helping to build the capacities of current officers while preparing the next generation of police officers and leaders to assume these duties themselves. It is a tremendous responsibility and not one we can handle alone. In fact, our Secretaries General Action for Peacekeeping initiative underscores that the success of peacekeeping depends on the collective commitment of all stakeholders to better prepare, train, and equip uniformed personnel through innovative approaches, including more partnerships and co-deployments with organizations such as European Union, African Union, and in the concrete case today, European Gendarmerie Force. As a concrete example of our successful collaboration to date, the EUROGENDFOR has deployed a 6-member specialized police team embedded with our Serious and Organized Crime SOC unit of the police component of our mission in Mali, known as MINUSMA. The team trains the Malian security forces to collect and analyze criminal data and also performs these tasks to support investigations into criminal activities targeting UN personnel and assets, which is a vital role for fighting impunity and strengthening accountability. Regarding the Vanguard capability of the IPO report, refers to all and particularly also to the United Nations Standing Police Capacity, which was established in 2007 in Brindisi Italy, to serve as a rapidly deployable startup capability for new peace operations, as it did in MINUSMA and in our mission in Central African Republic, known as MINUSCA, amongst others, as well as to assist existing missions with the temporary provision of policing, advice, and expertise. We have taken other steps in this direction. At the startup of MINUSMA, for example, through the intermission arrangement, we were able to bring a foreign police unit from our mission in Liberia to address immediate operational needs. To foster more predictable and dynamic process between the UN Secretariat and Member States for ensuring readiness and timely deployments, the United Nations also established the Peacekeeping Capabilities Readiness System, known by the acronym of PCRS. The PCRS provides clearly defined criteria and processes for the registration and verification of foreign police units. It has 4 levels, including the highest, the rapid deployment level, in which a unit is deemed to be ready for deployment within 60 days of a formal invitation from the Secretariat. The PCRS enables the United Nations to communicate mid-term needs and emerging trends, and Member States to make the relevant pledges. This process has helped to more rapidly create a pool of qualified units, allowing us, for example, to support MINUSMA ambitious adaptation plan, to generate the needed assets now in MINUSCA, and to establish an integrated guard unit in unit terms comprising elements from 4 police units from 3 different countries. Dear moderator, dear fellow panelists, distinguished colleagues, the United Nations Police know well the value of the EUROGENDFOR deployments. The AGF team in MINUSMA strengthens the impact of the police component in an extremely complex operational environment characterized by a high level of drug trafficking, illegal arms trade, and trafficking in humans and migrants towards Europe. Moreover, there are frequent attacks against the mission itself by various armed groups, and the AGF team's expertise is critical in responding to criminal acts and fighting impunity. Looking to other prospects of collaboration, let me share with the audience that I served, as the distinguished moderator just said, I served with honor as MINUSCA Police Commissioner from 2014 to 16, and saw firsthand the benefits of our close collaboration with the European Union and the African Union and other bilateral partners in providing technical assistance and training to the internal security forces. I view the deployment of an AGF unit to MINUSCA as a good opportunity to seize our comparative advantages in areas of complementarity, for example, customs, border management, and civil protection. One lesson I can share is that whether considering collaboration with other organizations or with other components in an integrated mission, it is important to set clear parameters from the outset. A fundamental issue for the United Nations Police is that we must keep a distinct profile to build and maintain trust with the community. Our roles and responsibilities, command and control, in relation to the civilian, military, and other actors must be clearly delineated, including the transfer of responsibilities in cases of unified command. At this juncture, let me share with the audience that the Police Division and the Office of Military Affairs recently approved the DPO guideline on combined military and police in coordination mechanisms in peace operations. We must also ensure that we, as the United Nations Police and whichever organizations we work with, operate cohesively. Apologies. As I said, we source police officers from over 90 countries all over the world. The need for a coherent doctrine defining what we do and how we approach our tasks gave rise to the deployment and development of the Strategic Guidance Framework for International Policing, known as SGF. This overarching policy foundation is already helping us to achieve coherence, reproduce our past successes, and avoid past mistakes in the future. While developed by the United Nations and our member states and partners, the SGF could be of use for any organization or country that deploys police internationally to ensure that the assistance they provide is based on international norms and standards, human rights compliant, gender responsive, and evidence-based. To ensure that all the United Nations peacekeeping personnel have a common understanding of United Nations policing and can function in an integrated manner once deployed, applying the same principles and standards to pre-deployment training delivered by our member states and training provided by the UN is essential. With our member states, we created UNPOL Training Architecture Program to improve existing and develop new UN policing training materials in accordance with the SGF throughout our training continuum, from pre-deployment to induction and from in-mission to post-service. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I welcome this discussion and look forward for furthering our partnership and synergies with the EUROGENDFOR, European Union, and other relevant entities towards our common goal of fostering sustainable peace and security for the people we are entrusted to protect. As I mentioned in the beginning, Action for Peacekeeping highlights our shared responsibility for the success of the peacekeeping enterprise, while the IPO report recommended the Secretariat to expand the base of police contributors and partnerships with regional organizations. In a vanguard spirit, I therefore strongly encourage EUROGENDFOR member states to consider further enhancing their contribution to deploying individual police officers, specialized police teams for UN service, so together we can serve the communities in need. Thank you very much, and I hand over back to you, dear Dr. Ricardo Carrilho, dear friend, dear moderator. Over to you.
Well, dear speaker, dear Superintendent Chief Luís Carrilho, thank you so much for your intervention, and thank you so much for your quite welcoming but at the same time challenging words at the end of your speech. Indeed, it is a challenge for all of us in our states to be able to engage more concretely and more effectively together with the various partners that can be on the ground and with the same common objective shared by all, which is security and stability for the world. Thank you so much, Superintendent Chief. It was a pleasure once again to be with you. I will now proceed with our agenda with our fourth speaker, as I would like to welcome and to thank the presence of General Francisco Esteban Perez, the EU CPCC Director, to provide us with the presentation on the EU integrated approach, the CSDP Compact, and the core responsiveness capacity. General Francisco Esteban Perez was appointed as the European Union Civilian Operators Commander and Director of the Civilian Planning and Conduct Capability at the European External Action Service on the 1st of October 2020. In this function, he commands the EU's 11 civilian CSDP missions. In his previous appointment, Major General Esteban Perez of the Spanish Guardia Civil served as commander of the Guardia Civil in Castilla-La Mancha between 2019-2020, he held the position of head of cabinet of the director of the general commander of the civilian guard. From June 2013 to June 2015, he was commander of the permanent headquarters of the European Gendarmerie force in Vicenza, Italy. From 2001 to 2010, he was actively involved in the development of the EU civilian crisis management, holding various positions, including Spain's CIVCOM delegate and as police advisor at the CPCC. He holds a law degree and an Army General Staff diploma. He has conducted courses in criminal and forensic investigation, command and leadership, peacekeeping operations, special training, amongst others. General Esteban Perez, please, the floor is yours, and thank you once again for accepting our kind invitation to be part of the seminar. General, if you are with us, I would like to welcome you once again and invite you to take the floor.
Thank you very much. I think that the problem is solved now. You can hear me for the inconvenience.
Thank you very much.
First of all, my warmest thanks to the organizers of this webinar, because I mean, to me, it's a double pleasure to be here in my capacity as director of the CPCC, and as well as you already mentioned, as a former commander of the permanent headquarters of the European Gendarmerie force in Vicenza. It's an honor as well to share the panel with these two outstanding colleagues, police officers, friends of mine as well, Luis Carrillo and Paulo Gonçalves, to whom I want to already congratulate for his next appointment as the following EGF commander. I wish you that you enjoyed at least as much as I did during those 2 years between 2013 and 2015. So, distinguished ambassador, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I would like first to clarify that as a director of the Civilian Planning and Conduct Capability, I am as well the so-called Civilian Operations Commander of all the missions deployed under the Command Security and Defense Policy. And today we have deployed in the world about 2,400 men and women, including local staff, in 11 missions, mainly on capacity building support to host countries on police and criminal justice cooperation. As you all know, our missions are a very important instrument for the European Common Security and Defense Policy, and as well a concrete example of the member states working together in supporting stabilization in international crisis areas, directly contributing as well to our common security. Through our advice and support, for example, capacity building in civilian security sectors in the host nations, our missions are particularly well placed to work on the so-called evolving challenges, be it organized crime, hybrid, cybersecurity, threats, or radicalization and terrorism. The civilian compact has been mentioned several times during the panels, fostered as well closer cooperation between member state actors in civilian CLDP and justice and home affairs, respectively, addressing EU and member states' external and internal security priorities. The CPCC work actively with the justice and home affairs actors in the member states and awareness raising with the JH Council working groups, as well as with the respective agencies, Eurojust, Europol, Frontex, and CEPOL. But our efficiency is further boosted as well by cooperation with our military colleagues, and for example in Mali or in Central African Republic, as we complement each other with our respective capabilities and capacities. These cooperations allow us for a more structured and efficient integrated approach. It's true that certain threats are more fit for civilian approaches, while others require military expertise quite often, so a combination of both is clearly necessary. With regard to today's subject on EGF potential within civilian CLDP, let me sketch the basic parameters for our arrangement when it comes to rapid response. also including the core responsiveness capacity in the light of the civilian compact developments. The core responsiveness capacity originates in the EU Global Strategy, published in June 2016, and is not a single tool. It's rather a broad concept with several components, which include previous efforts as the mission support platform and the warehouse too. The necessity to have a capacity available originates from the numerous civilian CSDP missions launched so far. The lessons identified are that, especially in very early stages of civilian CSDP missions, a demand of having the core functions filled without having the respective O-plan, the budget, impact statement, and staff in place available. The core responsiveness capacity is part of the civilian compact. It's commitment 11 and 12, and CPCC is contributing to the implementation of relevant commitments. The overall objective is faster delivery in theater when the political decision about the civilian CSDP mission has been taken. When developing the idea of the core responsiveness capacity, three main principles were identified. The tool should be an existing one. The tool should use existing structures, and the tool should be embedded in a multi-layered approach. The layers of responsiveness recognizing three main principles as follows. The first layer is 30 people, including experts, of course, including 8 in the mission support platform, 3 in the FPI, financial instrument, and 5 coming from the CPCC. In the second layer, we have the EU member states expertise to be deployed, and specialized teams, and of course the EDF. And the third layer is counts on regular corporate contributions, exchange of staff between our missions, or even detaching people from the CPCC, and as well visiting experts. In principle, we use the core responsiveness capacity in 2 different scenarios. The first, when new mission is set up. We need to speed up operational planning processes and the deployment in theater. In existing missions, to provide larger contributions, supporting the contextual change, demanded refocusing, or provide temporary reinforcement as necessary, deploying floaters. Concretely, these 3 responsiveness layers are expected to meet the requirements of capacity and rapid response. EGF contributing member states have delivered during the years individual experts to most of the civilian CSDP missions. We rely on the experts from all law enforcement agencies and the wider security networks, as the police, prosecutorial services, the judiciary, prisons, probation services, but also to security and intelligence services. Framework agreements between the EAS, External Action Service, and the EDF are in place, as well as concepts on the use of IPUs and rapid deployment of police elements, although the issue of command and control, as well as the financing, is still outstanding. Our civilian CSDP missions engagements built on resolutions coming either from the United Nations country invitation, but moreover, we have to follow what our member states agreed in the Political and Security Committee regarding the mandate of the mission. I think that EU4 SCA was deployed in between 2014 and March 2015 is a good example of rapid response, and the EDF contributed with 101 policemen in an integrated police unit to contribute to the military mission in Bangui. I think it's a good example, not only the rapid deployment, but it's a good example of well-doing, as the General Pontier, the operations commander, stated in the last report of the mission, in the final report of the mission in Bangui was becoming more and more a police mission or civilian mission, instead that a military mission. And thanks to the presence of the integrated police unit, the operation, the commander managed to reach the goals. I think that as well that the annex devoted to our IPU in the final report explained by itself the advantages and the added value that the EGF brought to the military mission. We are continually developing our own capacities within the CPCC. We take models as well into account when developing new concepts, new ideas, or new standard operating procedures, concepts coming from the United Nations, of course. And as well, we have a similar concepts on uniform, on integrated police units within the EGF and the CPCC, the Civilian Command Security and Defense Policy. But there is, to me, a continuous need for revision. So far we have managed. We have managed to set up our missions or to reinforce the running ones through the visiting experts and specialized teams. But the commitments for the future are huge, and for sure we will need to explore new ways of doing things, and as well to develop the different layers of the co-responsiveness capacities. In this regard, I think that the EGF is very well placed because in 2014, a general administrative arrangement between the European Gendarmerie Force and the European External Action Service was signed on the cooperation under the common security and defense policy area. So the framework is there. The added value of the paper is as well that the paper proposes possible contribution by the EGF, and the structure of the paper follows the structure of the crisis management procedures of the European Union. So it is crystal clear to us what the EGF can bring to us in the different phases. What I'm missing here is a further development of this framework agreement. I think that we could go through operationalize this agreement in two strands, the civilian one and the military one. This is something which is pending, and there we can limit, or we can explicit, better said, which is the level of ambition of the EGF in terms of deployment in the different areas. And for example, a concrete example would be, okay, we need to set up immediately, we need to quickly react to set up a new mission. If the level of ambition could be, for example, to deploy 50% of the people that they have in Vicenza. So more or less it will be, broadly speaking, 15 people directly. So it means to split the headquarters into two. I know by my own experience that by simply detaching police experts coming from Vicenza, there are at least 38 more working for these police experts. So in the end, we are benefiting as well from Vicenza SQ. But this is, to me, very important if we want to quickly react. So minor details can become a problem. So, for example, vaccinations. If people are not vaccinated, that will take longer to deploy. That happened already, and this is why I'm telling this. And then we have to clarify the financial problem, if there is any problem, who is going to pay for what and for how long they can be deployed, and as well to clarify the command and control, because I don't think that will be a problem, because the experience speaks by itself. So this is what I wanted to transmit. So my idea, my proposal would be, let's operationalize the administrative agreement and see where we may have obstacles, to solve the obstacles beforehand. Like this, the cooperation between the EGF and the CPCC the civilian common security and defense policy will be easy to do. Thank you very much for your attention.
General, thank you very much for your intervention, and I would like to thank you in particular for your personal experience brought up to our attention. As a matter of fact, I would indeed stress the point that you have made in terms of making sure that whenever there's a need for a rapid intervention, small or minor details will not oblige us to or prevent us from being able to provide that capacity to the ground. General, thank you so much once again. I will now proceed then with the presentation of the fifth speaker. General, we will be with you in a while. Hopefully your IT support team can also help you to overcome this difficulty, but thank you once again for your cooperation. As the fifth speaker, I would like to introduce Colonel Paulo Gonçalves, the current EUROGENFOR Assistant Chief of Staff for Operations, and within 8 days, the following EUROGENFOR Commander, to provide us with a presentation on the EUROGENFOR added value, bringing the security and capacity gaps. Colonel Paulo Macedo Gonçalves took office as Assistant Chief of Staff for Operations and Exercises Division of the EUROGENFOR Permanent Headquarters on the 1st of August 2019. Formerly, he was carrying out duties as Chief of Cabinet of the National Republican Guard, Deputy General Commander, and before he has served as Chief of Cabinet of the GNR Operational Commander. He has been serving as GNR officer since 1997, and throughout his career he served in several GNR operational units, such as Crowd and Riot Control Platoon Commander, Traffic Detachment Commander, and has a staff officer in a territorial command. He has served as a resident teacher in the military academy and in the operations department of the Armed Forces University Institute. He has international experience, being the most relevant as a planning officer at a multinational division Southeast Basra, Iraq in 2005. He is qualified with a master's degree in military sciences, specialization in internal security, post-graduation diploma in law and security, and post-graduation diploma in defense and security, besides holding the Portuguese Joint Staff course. Colonel Gonçalves, please, the floor is yours. Thank you once again for also accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much, sir. I take this opportunity to address my sincere compliments to you. Dear ambassadors, my dear commanding general, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My first words are going to those ones that are not visible on the screen, but are also attending to this webinar. Thank you very much to you all, and thank you for joining us. Secondly, I would like to congratulate the organization of this webinar for such initiative and for all the efforts that you are putting on this. Thank you also for the invitation to partake in this event. It is for me a great honor. I would like also to address myself to the previous lecturers for the excellent and outstanding presentations that were provided during this webinar. Your presence also reflects the high importance of this event and represents a really added value for this webinar. As we are talking about the added value, it's now up to me to present the EUROGENFOR and its added value. So I'm Colonel Paulo Gonçalves from the Portuguese Guarda Nacional Republicana, and I'm currently the head of the Operations and Exercise Divisions within the EUROGENFOR Permanent Headquarters. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm proposing to you the following agenda. I'm going to start with a briefly approach to the stability policy concept. Then I'm going to present in general terms the EUROGENFOR, then the EUROGENFOR capabilities and its added value, and I will finish with a quick snapshot regarding our engagements. Well, it's not possible to talk about EUROGENFOR without a previous reference to the stability policy concept. Stability policy concept can be defined as a range of activities aiming at temporary substitution or the strengthening of the host nation police to support the establishment of the rule of law. We can say that it's a provision of a framework of security in twofold effect. In one hand, to ensure that population is safeguarded from criminal and terrorist aggressions, and in the other, to ensure that local institutions can rapidly take back their tasks and carry them in an effective manner. You can find the origins of this concept in the Brahimi report. One of the conclusions of this report, it was the identification of a security gap, which means the apparent inability to properly address the security policy issues. So this report recommended a new structure for the peacekeeping operations, where it was highlighted the importance of having police capabilities among the structure of those peace operations. So saying that, we can state that stability policy activities are meant to be performed in two main different scenarios or in two main different phases. The phase between the armed conflict and the complete stabilization, in which the conventional military force do not have the capacity to establish and preserve law and order or public security. And the local police forces are not able to act effectively. Or in a phase before an armed conflict, which requires the intervention of robust police forces or at least a special capabilities in a specific area. Stability policy concept is accepted and shared by NATO, United Nations, European Union, African Union, and of course by EUROGENDFOR, even though the designation of the stability policy units could differ within those organizations. Accordingly, with the European Union doctrine, the units are designated as integrated police units. In the NATO, the units are designated as a military specialized units, and in the United Nations, they are designated by formed police units. I would like to say that on this respect that EUROGENDFOR doctrine matches with the doctrine, with the European Union doctrine, but it's also in line with the other international organizations doctrine as NATO and United Nations. Well, it was on this context that, and around this concept, that EUROGENDFOR was created. So in the following minutes, I'm going to briefly present you the EUROGENDFOR. In 2004, a group of European Union member states, Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, and Netherlands, drafted a declaration of intent in which was expressed their willing to constitute an international organization with a full capability to conduct police missions, so it can participate in the initiatives of the international organization in the area of the crisis management. So a treaty was signed in 2007 by those countries, and the EUROGENDFOR was formally established. Currently, the EUROGENDFOR is composed by the following member states: France, Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Romania, and Poland. We have also Lithuania as a partner and Turkey as an observer. The aim of EUROGENDFOR is to offer the necessary and the proper capabilities to conduct police missions by setting up a pre-organized operational tool capable of performing all the police tasks, employable under a civilian or under a military chain of command, and to be available to the European Union, United Nations, NATO, OSCE, or even be able to ad hoc coalitions as it is stated in the Treaty of Belfast. So the possible scenarios for intervention of EUROGENFOR are inter alia, substitution complementing of local police forces in the areas where conflicts are led to a significant administration breakdown. The EUROGENFOR presence may be mandated to perform either all or some aspects of the police functions, thus being entitled to executive police powers. It can also intervene in the strengthening of local police forces in areas characterized by a high level of insecurity and criminality. The EUROGENFOR officers could train, monitor, mentor, and advise the local police forces in order to improve their professional skills and standards, contributing to their restructuring and wider security sector reform. EUROGENFOR can also contribute to humanitarian mission, as it happened in 2010 in support of the UN mission MINUSTA in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, after the earthquake. So the EUROGENFOR is organized in 3 different levels. The strategic level, represented by the high-level interministerial committee, most known as CIMIN, it's a French abbreviation. The operational level, which is represented by the permanent headquarters, and finally, the tactical level represented by the units and the assets that member states make available to the EUROGENFOR. Referring to the strategic level, the CIMIN is the EUROGENFOR decision-making body. This committee ensures the political coordination, the political control, and gives the strategic guidance to the EUROGENFOR, in particular to its permanent headquarters. Each EUROGENFOR member state is usually represented in the CIMIN by the General Commander or Director General of the Gendarmerie Force, by a high representative of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and for some states, with a high representative of the Minister of Defense or Interior, depending on the subordination of the national force. All the decisions and guidelines in CIMIN should be adopted by consensus. Each member state ensures the presidency of the CIMIN for 1 year. In the current year, the presidency is being ensured by Poland. The operational level is represented by the permanent headquarters. The permanent headquarters, consisting of the commander and his staff, represents the most visible part of the force, in addition to the EUROGENFOR assets deployed abroad. The PHQ is dedicated to the implementation of the CIMIN decisions, to planning and to conduct the operations, the coordination of EUROGENFOR contribution to the international crisis management operations. The PHQ has a traditional headquarters organizations, and it is composed by 39 positions covered by officers from the member states. Some of those positions are covered in a permanent basis, the ones that are referred in white, and some of them in a 2 years rotation basis, the ones represented in red in this slide. This PHQ is located in the city of Vicenza, Italy, with NATO Stability Policy Center of Excellence and with the Italian Center of Excellence for Stability Policy Units. Normally, we refer to these facilities as the Stability Policing Hub. And finally, the tactical level. As I said before, the tactical level is represented by the forces and assets that member states make available to the EUROGENFOR. We can say that EUROGENFOR relies in all the existing capabilities of the member states. So it's easy to imagine the large spectrum of the available capabilities, taking into consideration the gendarmerie type forces as the Italian Carabinieri, the French Gendarmerie, the Spanish Guardia Civil, or, why not, the Portuguese Guarda Nacional Republicana, or even the Romanian Gendarmerie, or the Polish Gendarmerie. I'm sorry for the pronunciations. We can also count on the capabilities from the Lithuanian Public Security Service and the Turkish Gendarme. So in general terms, the EUROGENFOR possible contributions for crisis management operations are a robust intervention by integrated police units, or even by specialized teams or specialized elements, or even by single individuals as police experts, advisors, mentors, and trainers. I would like to underline that we are not cuffed to our capabilities. We are open to the participation of other forces or individuals from other nations. We are not other nations that are not member states of the EUROGENFOR. Of course, if it is so decided by the international organization, or if it is under a legal framework, and if it is decided by our member states. Now I would like to refer to the 4 main topics related with our added value. So I should start with the first topic related with the full spectrum of police tasks for crisis management. EUROGENFOR is a flexible tool that can generate the appropriate capacity depending on the situation, from a robust units as IPUs to criminal investigators for executive mandates, or even the capacity to perform training, monitoring, mentoring, and advising activities in strengthening mandates. On this topic, I would like also to refer the resident and the permanent planning capability of these permanent headquarters that could be put on the disposal of any civil or military structure. This planning capability also includes the planning of training activities by developing standardized training models in line with the international organization doctrine, namely in line with the United Nations doctrine. Regarding our next topic, our flexibility and modular organization, EUROGENFOR as a modular organization, we are able to deploy an operational headquarters, integrated police units, teams of experts, or a high-level experts advisor. EUROGENFOR has also the capability to deploy current forces immediately operational, thanks to the enhanced interoperability between European Union gendarmeries, which are sharing similar traditions and professional cultures, common doctrinal concepts, common planning methodology, and training procedures. Regarding the next topic, the capability to rapidly deploy and to cover the security gap, I would like to say that by doctrinal concept, EUROGENFOR is rapidly deployable. In our concept, it is stated that we can deploy up to 800 personnel within 30 days notice to move, and to enable and to fill the security gap in a shorter delay. EUROGENFOR has also the capability to provide a startup for a police mission by deploying an operational headquarters and the necessary staff. It has also the capability to assist other missions and operations by providing them with a temporary reinforcement. Regarding the last topic, transition capabilities from military to civilian operational environment, EUROGENFOR has the ability to operate under military and civilian command, allowing coordination, cooperation, and sharing of information with armed forces and police forces. EUROGENFOR is also able to operate in hostile environments from the very first stage of a crisis management operation. And so we get to my last topic, the EUROGENFOR engagement. In this slide are represented our past and current engagements and our international cooperations. I don't want to bother you too much on this. I would like only to make a reference to the current engagements. Currently, we have some EUROGENDFOR assets deployed in the NATO Resolute Support Mission in Afghanistan, in the United Nations Mission MINUSMA in Mali, in the EUCAP Sahel mission also in Mali, the European Union Training Mission in Central African Republic, the EUFOR Althea mission in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the European Union Border Assistance Mission in Libya, and we have also an officer from this PHQ deployed in the European Union Liaison and Planning Cell to Libya. And with this, I'm concluding my presentation, and I'm looking forward for the questions that might come from your side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colonel, for your presentation, and thank you very much above all for showing us the potential that is currently upholded and invested in the EUROGENDFOR forces for dealing with the current international challenges that are part of our society. Thank you very much. It was an excellent opportunity to know from within what are the capabilities and capacities of EGF at the current stage. And thank you obviously for the three panel speakers that we had the opportunity to listen to until now in this second round of interventions. To conclude, I would like to initiate a 15 minutes debate period, bearing in mind some of the interesting questions that were raised by the audience. The first of which I would like to address, or has been posed to Superintendent Chief Luís Carrilho, the UN Police Advisor, which is, Luís, having in mind the EGF can gather and coordinate assets from different EU countries, more easily bringing together police units with high standards and expertise on crisis management, do you consider possible and desirable to establish a memorandum of understanding between the UN and EGF to ensure such units on rapid deployment level immediately available to the UN? I mean, the second question, but I think it's related to the first one. If desirable or feasible, which should be the following steps for the organizations involved in this regards? Superintendent Chief Luís Carrilho, I would leave you the floor for this first question. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, dear Dr. Ricardo, and of course, a pleasure to listen to my dear friend Paco, General Esteban Perez, and of course to Colonel Paulo Gonçalves, that I was keeping secret, but as General Esteban congratulated already in the future functions, let me also echo what he just said and wish bon vin, success to him in his future career and in his future assignment as the head of EUROGENDFOR. Now, concerning the question, of course, the United Nations and the deployment and the setup of the missions, we are working usually when we speak, or always when we are speaking about the peace operation, peacekeeping operation, or a special political missions, but more focused on the peacekeeping. We have a mandate of the Security Council, and of course the member states are really the ones that have the authority within the United Nations to decide. Going more to the level that we are here discussing in terms of deployment of units, individual police officers, specialized police teams, of course, one of the main topics that we are discussing nowadays, and as I stressed in terms of the action for the peacekeeping, one of the topics is clearly the performance. Even there are resolutions tabled by the Security Council and approved, requesting, of course, that the peacekeeping more and more will be more performant, more capable, better pre-deployment, with better pre-deployment, better equipped, and that at the end we can, of course, make a better service. This has to be framed, and I will come back to the question, this has to be framed in the spirit of the action for peacekeeping, in the primacy of the politics, our action to be centered on the people, that our spirit always in a peace-building approach to make sure that there is ownership and that institutions of the country, particularly in terms of law enforcement, are built and in partnership. So we see the United Nations Police, with very good eyes, the deployment of a police unit from the member states of that compose the European Agenda. And as you said, and well, and particularly it was stressed also in the question, the capacities, and now let me speak by experience. I stress the case of Central African Republic, but the Portuguese GNR, the Portuguese Guarda Nacional Republicana, when I was commissioned in Timor-Leste, of course, together with individual police officers from GNR, from my institution of origin, PSP, and also from members of CEF, the Immigration Service, but the GNR deployed a foreign police unit that we all recognized made a wonderful contribution. So now building on that experience, and with 2, 3, 4 different countries, and of course we have the concept of the foreign police units, clearly there is scope, and once again with the political willingness, and you stressed that point when I finished my presentation, dear Dr. Ricardo Carrillo, with that political engagement to deploy to a peace operation. As I said, we have the PCRS, the police, the capability readiness system. Of course, we have the rapid deployment level. There are steps to be taken, but everything starts from that political willingness and the pledge. So we are very open to receive a pledge from the member states that compose EUROGENDFOR, and let me stress the point, European Union is a key partner of the United Nations, and there will be, of course, I see scope for that. In terms of the steps is, and once again, the United Nations is composed of member states, but I'm not the legal expert in that area, but I'm very, very well inside of the principles, and I see that it will be quite easy to deploy if we have that political dimension, that of course the Security Council within the deployment that we have right now, but the Security Council just gave us the indication, the instruction, not indication, just ordered us to increase the military and the police component in Central African Republic. We went to the countries for the pledges. Of course, we had units that were ready to be deployed. So there is a work that we can do, and in partnership, I believe that that can be feasible. To finalize, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but to finalize, the example that we had with the specialized police team deployed in Mali, it's a good example. And let me be honest with you, because partnership we have internally, of course, with all the agencies, funds and programs, UNODC, UNITAR, our colleagues of human rights, our colleagues of also UN Women. And we also have that partnership with the big police organization, that is Interpol. So these synergies can be established, and I would like to reiterate not only the partnership with the European Union and of course General Esteban Pérez, but particularly with EUROGENDFOR, the countries that compose the EUROGENDFOR, and we are willing to discuss that deployment of a foreign police unit to a peace operation in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Luís Carrilho, and thank you for your insight as regards to this matter. I think that the question has been addressed properly, in particular bearing in mind also the importance of the foreign police units and the possibility of ranging here another area of cooperation to the activities developed by the EUROGENDFOR. Thank you once again for addressing the question that have been put forward by the audience. General Esteban Pérez, I do have two questions for you as well, if you would be so kind as to bear with us. The first one would be, do you consider feasible for the CPCC and the MPCC to manage jointly EU operations, taking advantage of the EU battle group and EUROGENDFOR as EU core responsiveness capacity? And the second one would be, should such capacity or instrument be a desirable outcome of the EU strategic compass? General, the floor is yours, please. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We are mixing a lot of things in these questions. So the CPCC and the MPCC managing joint operations. So first of all, the military planning and conduct capabilities so far, they are conducting EUTM missions, so EU training missions, not executive missions so far. We have a very fluent relationship between us, between the CPCC and the MPCC, through what we call the joint support coordinating cell. It's mainly devoted to supporting tasks, how to find synergies in those scenarios where we have both mission deployed, civilian and military mission. They meet regularly, once a month at least, at the level of the chief of staff. So, but there we can deal with any possible problem. Then we speak about the EU battle group and EUROGENDFOR. So it seems that by nature it would be a military mission, as it was the case in Central Republic of Africa. In such a case, they follow normally the military procedure, and then they report to the military committee, because the chair of the military committee is the primary point of contact for the military missions, as it is defined today. And then the EU core responsiveness capacity is only and exclusively a civilian concept, not applied to the military side. So we are combining here a lot of different things. I think that that can be solved. I don't see nowadays a joint SQ to conduct the mission as such. I think that what we did for Bangui, for the EU Force Bangui, was quite good in that moment. So we detached since the very beginning police aircraft for the planning phase. They dealt with the police part of the planning documents. And later on, we detached as well a police officer, it was Carabinieri, to Larissa, to the force SQ, to Larissa to advise the mission, to advise the general on police matters. The system worked properly. That would depend. I mean, if that happens, I see now a scenario that maybe we should be involved in a more joint manner. In case that the EGF is deployed within a military mission, and the main one of the aims of this mission should be kind of bridging mission to a civilian mission. In such a case, we need to join our efforts. So we need information from the EGF. We have to work to control what they are doing and to know what they are doing, because on the information that they will be providing from the ground, we will start planning our future mission. It's the only possible scenario that I see as a possible joint, but I mean possible, not joint. I don't think that it will be necessary. If this can be an outcome of the strategic compass, it's too early for us to say, because we are involved in the compass. But someone mentioned as well the EU strategic autonomy, so let's see what happens. But we have our own compact, so that means that our main effort nowadays is to fulfill the commitments, which are a lot, 22 or 23 commitments of the compact. And what we are trying is not to replicate or duplicate what is in the compact into the compass. So it's too early to say anything, but with the current situation, member states will have to in the end, at the end of the compass process, for sure they will have agreed on the level of ambition this strategic autonomy, what it means. So I'm not closed, absolutely not, to have a joint whatever with the military side of the house, because we have very, very close contacts every day. Even it seems that we are moving to a new building soon, and one of the preconditions was okay, where the MPCC goes, the CPCC will follow. So we see the need to be together. Up to the extent of joint, I don't see it nowadays, but I'm not close to any possible evolution on that. That will depend on the level of strategic autonomy defined by our member states at the end of the process of the compass. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General, for that clear view and honest, I would say, which is something interesting to recall in these sort of conferences. People sometimes are a bit afraid to speak their minds, but in this case, I think, General, we must thank you for that honesty and that sincerity. I do have just another question here from the audience to our third speaker, which was Colonel Paulo Gonçalves, as we know. Colonel, bearing in mind the EU core responsiveness capacity and the UN Vanguard capability, do you consider that EUROGENDFOR is the proper police tool to fulfill the intentions behind of such instruments? Colonel, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your question. I think I'm not the right person to answer to that question, because my answer will be yes, we are the proper police tool. And I'm saying that because, as you know, we have a lot of experience in crisis management operations. We have also, our doctrinal concepts are in line with the international organization, namely the United Nations and European Union. As I was stated in my previous presentations, I think we are the proper tool because we have the ability to rapidly deploy a robust unit to perform all the full spectrum of police tasks. And at this point, I would like also to stress that we have already some agreements signed with United Nations and European External Action Service, and we should take advantage on that. So my answer to your question, yes, I think we are the proper police tool to fulfill the intention behind such instruments. Thank you.
Colonel, thank you so much, and also bearing in mind the functions that you are currently upholding and the ones that you will be upholding in 8 days, I think the answer was obviously in line with what could be expected. But thank you so much once again for your reply. Well, I have no further questions from the floor. I don't know if there are any other requests for intervention. If that's not the case, yes, there is one.
Yes, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And Colonel Giuseppe Zirone, the current fading out commander of the European Gendarmerie Force Permanent Headquarters, Excellencies and esteemed commanders. Sorry to bother you, but it is just for a second. And just to add something to what the UN Police Advisor mentioned before, because as Colonel Gonçalves stated right now, in 2016, the Simian Presidency signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the former Department of Peacekeeping Operations, now Department of Peace Operations, and it will be really a pleasure and the honor to boost the cooperation with the United Nations, taking the move from the already existing memorandum. I dare to say that I would even like to stress that not only the deployment of the foreign police unit could and should be pursued, because the deployment of a foreign police unit is really demanding for the member states, for each country, and especially in terms of the rotation and the sustainability of the assets. But even the possible contribution in terms of sharing of expertise, of course, gaining the expertise from the United Nations and primarily from the police component of the United Nations will be an asset even for EUROGENFOR, and even the possible deployment of single police officers or even of specialized teams in line with our doctrinal developments and in line with our operational concept would be really, really good. And following even what the UN Police Advisor mentioned before, it was very long, the commitment of the Portuguese Guardia Nazionale Republicana in Timor-Leste, Italy, on the other hand, just for a shorter period, but offered and deployed a foreign police unit. And this is why I said it was really bad, really demanding, to Haiti when the tsunami happened and the disasters happened in Port-au-Prince and throughout the country. And that was really a great experience, even to know exactly the mechanisms to work under the United Nations and under the Department of Field Support. I remember Ms. Malcorra, who was the Undersecretary General and the responsible for the Department of Field Support, paid a visit in Italy and the 2nd Mobile Brigade before the deployment of the FPU, and it was really, really, really an outstanding experience under the United Nations flag. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colonel, and thank you also for sharing your experience. And I do stress your point as regards to the involvement of FPUs and the need for better sharing of experience and knowledge on the ground, and from all those that have already instruments that have been signed or possible mechanisms of cooperation that can perhaps be reused as a potential means of further developing our cooperation. At this stage, I do not see any further questions. I don't know if there are any requests for intervention. If that, Luis, yes, Superintendent Chief Luis Carrilho, I will give you back the floor. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, and of course, thank you very much, dear moderator, dear Ricardo, and is to acknowledge the words of course, Colonel Giuseppe, and to say the excellent relationship that we have with EUROGENDFOR, and that we are open and willing to cooperate, to further cooperate in the future, either with the deployment of individual police officers, specialized police teams, but particularly and also in terms of foreign police units. Not to also to highlight the good work, of course, by experience, I was commissioner in Timor-Leste, so I benefited from the Portuguese FPU, but let me tell you that the colleagues here in the HQ also speak highly about the engagement of the deployment in Haiti, so kudos also to Italy on that. But the point that I would like to flag, it is looking in a positive way to the future. Next year, we will have the United Nations Chiefs of Police Summit, where the heads of police component from all over the world will gather, and where the member states, the police contributing countries, and the ones that even if they are not police contributing countries, they are financial contributing countries, they are political supportive countries to the police dimension. And I would like in this forum kindly request your support because that is the forum where we discuss police in the United Nations, policing in the world, where of course we expect in the future that the Security Council more and more will deploy police. In 2018, we had representatives from Portugal, from PSP, from GNR. It was the actual General Commander, my dear friend General Claro, that of course did both the excellent contribution to the United Nations policing, and it is for the member states of EUROGENDFOR, to take advantage also in this vein, because of course we are looking forward in the United Nations Police for partnership. We are looking forward for enhanced performance, and without, I don't want to take too much time, but really to thank Dr. Ricardo Carrilho as the moderator, my dear fellow panelists, General Paco, my dear friend of course also Colonel Paulo, but for this excellent initiative, and how honored as United Nations Police Advisor, and also as Portuguese in the aegis of the Portuguese Presidency, to participate in such a high-level webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Superintendent-in-Chief. Thank you very much, Luis. General, I don't know if you want to take the floor. No?
No. No.
No.
I don't know. Can you hear me or not?
We can hear you, General. Yes.
No, only to thank you for moderating this panel, and to thank all the people involved again, and to say that we remain at the disposal of the United Nations. In fact, I will see Luis Carrillo on Friday as well, and at the disposal of the EGF, because I mean we believe in the integrated approach, including all the partners. So. As I said, I remain ready here to start conversations with EGF to operationalize through SOPs or whatever the possible roles of the EGF within our missions. So they will be very much welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General, once again, and thank you for your availability and cooperation towards this webinar. Well, if there are no further interventions, I would like to thank our guest speakers, our audience, for the questions that have been put forward, and for participating and contributing to this very fruitful and interesting reflection that we have taken today in the morning. I would perhaps like to try to summarize some of the main conclusions that may be gathered from the presentations given from our panelists and from the questions that have been put forward. As a summary of the third presentation provided by Superintendent-Chief Luis Carrillo, the UN Police Advisor on the United Nations Integrated Missions on UN Police and on the rapid deployment capabilities, I would like to recall that Superintendent-Chief Luis Carrillo has underlined the importance of the UN missions, which are currently developed all over the world, with a growing level of responsibility and with a clear need for collective engagement, including partnerships and co-deployments with the European Union, with the African Union, and most obviously with the European Gendarmerie forces, with EUROGENDFOR. The use of Gendarmerie forces was mentioned by Superintendent-Chief Luis Carrillo as a particularly relevant tool in cases of need for rapid deployment intervention, serving as a concrete example the important work that has been carried out by EGF teams in the MINUSMA mission in Mali. Its robust capabilities for providing training and operational interventions in such vast domains such as the prevention and fight against criminality, border control, customs responsibilities, but also in even civil protection activities, was also mentioned as one of the multiple capacities or capabilities that could be provided by EGF in these regards. As UN Police Advisors, Superintendent-Chief Luis Carrillo underlined the need to respect coherence, avoid past mistakes, and take better profit of all possible partnerships that may be established in order to better safeguard the objectives and principles of UN missions, a context where EGF plays and can continue to play an ever more important role. I would like to underline the last remark made by Superintendent-Chief Luis Carrillo, while recalling all of us that in the upcoming year there will be a UN Chiefs of Police Summit held probably in New York, I guess, as it happened in the one in 2017, and where indeed it would be important for further discussions and debates to be carried out by the chiefs of police in these regards. Superintendent-Chief Luis Carrillo, once again, thank you very much for your participation and for your contribution. Thank you once again. To summarize the fourth presentation delivered by General Francisco Esteban Perez, the EU CPCC Director, on the integrated approach, the CSDP Compact and the core responsiveness capacity, I would like to underline that the General has shown to us the importance of the Civilian Compact and the need to guarantee a closer cooperation with the EU partners for the area of justice and affairs, including the relevant agencies in this regard, such as Europol and also, I believe, Frontex. In this regards, the General has shared with us the various capacity levels and potential existing in the civilian CSDP missions, aiming at the same time to reassure a co-responsiveness or a co-responsibility for the capacity building, embedded in a multi-layer approach, which brings to the forefront of responsibility local partners from the ground. General did not hide from the audience's evaluation, according to which it is important to speed up the decision-making processes under the CSDP missions, guaranteeing above all rapid response teams and, where appropriate, as we heard in the upcoming intervention, with the cooperation of the EUROGENDFOR forces. These can be of assistance in the CSDP context, as we all know. General, thank you so much once again for your time and for your availability for this webinar. Thank you so much. Well, to summarize the fifth intervention and final presentation of our webinar, we had the pleasure of listening to Colonel Paulo Gonçalves on the EUROGENDFOR added value, bridging the security and capacity gaps. And Colonel has recalled us that under the Brahimi report, it was clearly stated that stability policing activities should be included in all peacekeeping and peacebuilding missions in order to better safeguard the transition between the more military or robust international mission intervention and the sovereignty activities to be developed by the authorities of the ground, the local authorities. In these regards, we had the chance to listen to a detailed presentation of how EGF was created back in 2007 and how it is composed currently, which states and gendarmerie types of forces are currently engaged in EGF, and most obviously, what capacities, capabilities and potential added value can be brought by EUROGENDFOR to the international peace and stability. Colonel, thank you so much once again for your presentation, and best of luck for your future functions in the context of EGF. To finalize, I must confess that from a personal point of view, it is rather interesting to have the privilege and the opportunity to moderate this panel. In particular, bearing in mind that I was one of the persons that had the opportunity in 2007 to be there in Amsterdam, assisting to the signature of the treaty on the establishment of EUROGENDFOR. It is remarkable, the development and the evolution that has been seen for this international force, and it indeed shows the importance that both the European Union and the United Nations partners, and in general terms the international context, does attribute to the capabilities and the capacities from EUROGENDFOR, from the type of military law enforcement authorities that can bring to the international context in whichever territories, in whichever scenarios, and whichever phases of international missions. A contribution that I must confess must be shared, and values that are indeed common to all the partners. And I think the conference that we had here today, this webinar, did show us how important that EUROGENDFOR structure can be to the upcoming years in our lives. Ladies and gentlemen, dear speakers, dear guests, it has been an utmost pleasure and honor to have the opportunity of moderating this second panel of today's conference. And as I'm most confident and certain that it did contribute for the further reflection of the cooperation and possible reinforcement of bounds that can be established by all parties involved. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I give back the floor to the General Commander, Headquarters of the National Republican Guard. Thank you once again. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
We hope you are enjoying the webinar. Thank you all for joining us. Within a few minutes, we will have the EUROGENDFOR Summit Presidency remarks currently held by Poland, presented by Colonel Robert Osipovics. Afterwards, to conclude with our closing session, we will have the Portuguese Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Eduardo Cabrita.
Good morning, everybody. I would like to, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Great. It's a great honor and privilege to speak in front of you today. My name is Robert Osipovics. I'm talking from the Polish Military Gendarmerie HQ, and I represent the Summit Presidency at today's event. I firstly would like to thank all the distinguished speakers, ambassadors, general officers who preceded me today in this conference. I would also like to thank the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union for organizing this very important event. Firstly, I would like to say that it is very important to discuss the capabilities, European capabilities, in the context of the next 10, 20 years. The situation geopolitical situation will change very much in the next decade. The situation around Europe's borders is volatile and probably will remain so. EUROGENFOR is at the center of this process. European capabilities for crisis management, both military and civilian, when they will be developed, I think that EUROGENFOR will be vital for the proper usage and projection of in the theaters. I would like to compare EUROGENFOR to a Swiss Army knife. And as we can see today, EUROGENFOR is deployed in 8 foreign operations in very different regions. In Afghanistan, North and Central Africa, the Balkans. And what we will see is that the flexibility of EUROGENFOR, the capabilities that allow it to operate in a multitude of tasks and operations, allow it to work perfectly in this changing security environment and scenario. So, to conclude, in order not to prolong my remarks, I think that today's discussion is very important on the future development of European capabilities, and it is good to talk about EUROGENFOR and to promote it and to allow the information about its functioning and its operations to be more known. I hope that EUROGENFOR will also continue to grow, and with new members, partners and observers, that will definitely increase its capabilities and its possibilities of operating in the future in and around the borders of Europe. Thank you very much.
A presidência portuguesa da União Europeia está a aproximar-se do final. É por isso tão importante que se realize, ainda no âmbito da presidência portuguesa, esta iniciativa promovida pela EUROGENDFOR, centrada naquilo que são os seus desafios desta estrutura que reúne forças de natureza gendármica de um conjunto de Estados europeus, naquilo que é a resposta a compromissos no âmbito quer da União Europeia, quer das Nações Unidas. Portugal tem tido, através da Guarda Nacional Republicana, uma participação muito ativa na EUROGENDFOR. Assumiu a presidência recentemente e tem tido uma participação muito empenhada na sua estrutura central. É por isso que o debate que aqui é promovido, em torno da bússola estratégica de atuação e em torno daquilo que são os compromissos conjuntos no âmbito da política de cooperação, segurança e defesa, valorizam aquilo que é o papel da EUROGENDFOR no âmbito da presidência portuguesa do Conselho da União Europeia. Esta dimensão que nos tem permitido estar quer em ações das Nações Unidas, quer em ações promovidas pela União Europeia, num quadro de garantia daquilo que é a segurança dos europeus, deve aqui ser refletida e, sobretudo, devemos aproveitar este momento para a promoção daquilo que é uma dimensão estratégica num horizonte de médio e de longo prazo. A EUROGENDFOR está numa fase de reflexão sobre aquelas que são as razões que determinaram no início do século a sua constituição. Os desafios novos, uma relação muito estreita com os Estados dos Balcãs Ocidentais, com os Estados do Norte de África. A importância da presença na região do Sahel justificam hoje uma redefinição deste estatuto. Estou certo que todos aqueles que, no âmbito da segurança interna, no âmbito da definição da política externa, participam num quadro europeu nesta iniciativa, contribuirão para o aprofundamento deste desígnio. Bom trabalho a todos no âmbito da EUROGENDFOR.
It was truly a pleasure to share and learn from the different standpoints. Both the EU and the UN have developed approaches to strengthen partnerships, synergies, and instruments available for rapid deployment and intervention in a context of increasing global uncertainty. Similar concepts have been formulated by both organizations, which aim at having multinational standby forces with planning and rapid deployment capabilities to initiate or temporarily reinforce crisis management operations. With such framework, the potential of the European Gendarmerie force emerged due to the added value of this multinational organization and the ideas behind EUROGENFOR's genesis. This webinar has deepened the understanding about this stability policy instrument and bearing in mind the concept's alignment for the operational solutions foreseen. It may possibly facilitate further EU-UN synergies, also in the framework of the ongoing debate on the EU strategic compass. Thank you all for joining us. The event is now concluded.